This show is brought to you by SalCal Real Estate Connections. Welcome to the Telescope View. We're here tonight with the author of the final revelation of the Sun Project, Rick Teles, and yours truly, Larry Mangello. And tonight's show is going to be very interesting. It's about the 7 reasons to be extraterrestrial life exists. Why? And the reasons why, Rick, tell me.
Well, I think in the past month, especially in the last week, we have seen some tremendous, very important announcements from what we would consider officials, the government. The release of the 38 secret projects that were conducted under the direction of the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, which read like sci-fi fantasy. We talked about some of those. We've heard some stuff from NASA as far as some things that they're going to be doing with astrobiology and the issue of life in space. And I thought it was a good time now to kind of collect this information for all those doubters out there.
Yeah.
Let's present our case one more time and see how you feel about now. Is it possible that extraterrestrial life exists? And we have what we call the 7 reasons to believe extraterrestrial life exists. And we're going to kind of go backwards on these, but we have military and government witnesses that we've had over the years, but we have some new ones. We have archaeological evidence on Earth and Mars, xenoarchaeology, one of your favorite topics.
My favorite topic, yeah.
We now have 21st century science that supports the stories of UFO technology. When people said, oh, a UFO did this or that, years ago we'd say, that's not possible. Well, it is, and we're doing it ourselves today. All of a sudden, the government has admitted to taking UFOs seriously. That's the ATIP project, we'll mention that. Scientists are suddenly more confident and vocal about the existence of extraterrestrial life. Like you said, they're embracing it all of a sudden, when before some of them would say, eh.
Yeah, all of a sudden it's embraced, where this is a normal thing. There's nothing to be abnormal about this.
It's mainstream all of a sudden.
That's right.
I mean, we're going to lose our jobs here because it's all mainstream. And we're going to talk about the discovery of organic compounds within our solar system. Organic compounds are life. Look it up in the dictionary. And then we're going to look at what Kepler and Hubble have told us about the potential of extraterrestrial life. So I think when we talk about these, it's going to be hard to argue now that extraterrestrial life doesn't exist somewhere out there in the universe. Now, you can still argue whether it's been here, but I think we have evidence along those lines as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by going backwards, and we're going to talk a little bit about the military and the government experts, or what we would call very credible people who have talked about extraterrestrial life and believe that it exists. So this might be my weakest argument. But I have a lot of names here, and I want to talk about just a couple of them. Astronaut Neil Armstrong, Apollo 11 astronaut. We know what he did, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
He landed on the moon. Well, he passed away about a year ago, and they found some of his writings and his letters. And in it, he professed his interest in extraterrestrial life and his belief. But he also said something else, that he tried to protect what he called the whistleblowers, who at the time were talking about extraterrestrial life and probably being persecuted, I don't know a better term for saying it. Well, he believed in it, and he believed in what they were saying, and he tried to protect them from, the secrecy or the secrecy that we wanted to keep. Now, I can understand some of it if it's a national security issue. We also have on this list a number of other people, Colonel William Blanchard from Roswell, but we also have President George H.W. Bush,
yes,
who passed away recently. We all know that. But President Bush is noted for, when asked about extraterrestrial life, his response always was, I don't believe people are ready for the reality of extraterrestrial life, to know about it. So he's somebody else who was talking about it. And again, the list is very long. I like this one here, John Callahan, FAA Division Chief of Accidents and Investigations. He witnessed something, and he did a lot of investigation working with pilots, whatever, and he found, radar tracks and all kinds of information about a particular sighting. Lieutenant Philip Corso, U.S. Army Intelligence National Security Council, he wrote the book The Day After Roswell. where he talked about his job as reverse engineering or helping to reverse engineering technology from the Roswell UFO crash.
I'll tell you, he's the one that as far as I'm concerned, brought everything up front and let you know exactly what was going on.
He really did. And as we look at the ATIP, Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, a lot of the projects they did in that program were based on the stuff that Corso talked about. Now, he talked about them in 1997. This project took place 2007 through 2012. But all of a sudden, they're talking about exactly what he said.
That's right.
So he must have been right. Luis Elizondo, he was the director of ATIP at the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., and he basically said, extraterrestrial life exists, and that was part of the project. And he's been talking a lot lately. Colonel Charles Halt, the deputy base commander at Bentwaters Air Force Base in England. You had the Woodbridge Bentwaters Air Force Base in 1980. He actually had a sighting there over the nuclear base. He went out, he investigated it. He recorded everything that happened on audio tape. They talked about touching, actually, an alien craft that was a cold pebble glass surface. And we now know that some of the ways that we create anti-gravity cause the surfaces to become cold. Major Jesse Marcells, of course, he was the one who first reported us the Roswell, where it all started, the Roswell UFO crash. Nick Pope, British Ministry of Defense. He was part of the British Ministry of Defense, and he ran their UFO investigation office.
Yes.
And he talks about how it's all being true. And Senator Harry Reid, who was the sponsor of the ATIP project, he wanted to know what's going on in our skies, and he felt we weren't taking unidentified flying objects seriously enough, and that we're still not taking them enough.
Yeah,
not just the terrestrial version.
I mean, he was very boisterous.
He was very vocal about this.
Yes.
So that's my number 7. So I think that's a fairly good argument. These are very credible people. Now, I just want to mention these guys as part of this argument. These are the people I spoke to when I wrote the book. Captain Philip Raymond, United States Navy. He was part of Naval Intelligence. He was part of a multi-agency Joint Intelligence Committee. He was part with the Joint Chiefs and J39, which is a Joint Chiefs Intelligence Group. We also had Colonel Paul Farmer. He was a PhD in the United States Air Force. He was an aerophysicist. He was on the Foreign Technology Division, which is part of the Air Force, and they would, any foreign technology they would look at. Yeah, Russian, but everything. And he was also part of DARPA and the Defense Intelligence Agency. John Walker, he was Air Intelligence Agency. Now he was, John Walker was a psychologist, but also a linguist. And his job was to try and decipher what's going on and linguistically what kind of communications we were actually having. Rick Tucker, he was engineering. He was specifically cyber technology and cybersecurity type stuff that they would deal with, part of DARPA and the Air Intelligence Agency. And then, of course, Ken Hartman, he was director of special projects. He was the guy that created carve-out projects. He was the guy that created corporations under the Black Project. So I worked for a corporation. It was a private corporation, but it was funded by black budget.
Black budget.
It looked like a private corporation, but by doing it that way, we were protected from the Freedom of Information Act.
And these people, of course, were all in your book.
They're all in the book. Those guys were in the book. Now, the next thing that we had is we had the whole question of xenoarchaeology and the ancient astronaut theory, which you're very fond of.
My favorite. Oh, yeah.
All of a sudden, we have scientists, in particular at NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory, who are starting to say, wait a minute, there's a little more to this than what we would believe. And yes, everybody has fun with the ancient astronaut theory because of what's happening on Mars. So now they're looking at some of the archaeology or the xenoarchaeology, which has to do with extraterrestrial artifacts on Earth or anywhere where it would be extraterrestrial. And they say, well, it doesn't exist. Well, it certainly does on Mars because we're extraterrestrials and we have artifacts there. But as we look at some of these, we talk about things like we have up in the top here, up in here, we have Abydos in Egypt. And you can plainly see in some of these, this is what they found. If we look at it with today's eyes, this is a spaceship. This might be a submarine, a spaceship or an airplane. This would be a helicopter. And the question is, what did all these things mean? We have ancient art, like the Gelder's Baptism of Christ, which plainly shows a disc with some type of rays coming down. We have King Pakal's tomb. It looks like he's in a spacesuit, and if you see the whole top of his his sarcophagus. It looks like he's sitting in a spaceship, breathing through something or speaking through something. We then have Aten and Nefertiti supposedly getting information from this sphere, which we've always talked about intelligent extraterrestrial life sharing information through crystal spheres. So now we're looking at this and we're saying there may be more to the ancient astronaut theory than we ever thought. So we've got to take it more seriously. And this, again, is mainstream science starting to talk about this. So, again, we have another example. Now, here's one that I absolutely love when we talk about xenoarchaeology, or what's making them start to believe in ancient civilizations or civilizations from out in space. This is what we call the Mars lion. And this is a photo from NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory. You can go onto the NASA site, Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and you can find this picture. It's theirs. And if we look closely here, we see a lion laying on her side. We can see her nose. We can see her mouth with the teeth. We can see her ear, and we can see her eye right there. And if that's not enough, and I had a friend who worked at the Jet Propulsion Lab, he goes, this is driving all the scientists there nuts, because some are arguing it's natural, others are arguing, no, this is not natural.
How could a natural form like that?
Look at the cuts in this one, and you can't, I don't know how well you can see it on TV, but these look like they've been mitered.
Yes.
Right in there, okay? They're cut, and you have, look at the corners, and you have like a frame there. This is making them think not only about Mars, now they're finally admitting there may have been a civilization on Mars, but now it's making them come back to Earth and say, wait a minute, there may have been a civilization from Mars that maybe came here or from somewhere else.
Yes.
So that's really fascinating. We then have the next piece, which is all of a sudden our own 21st century technology kind of is corroborating or suggesting that it is, some of these stories we heard about UFO technology are very real. NASA talking about now gravitational waves and using gravitational waves for communication, using it to move.
And to move, propel a ship.
Propel a ship, even perhaps move asteroids. Engineered living materials projects. We're talking about creating living materials like we saw in the ATIP, programmable living matter that we can make it program and change. We just go one thing after another here. Organic material bubble up on different planets. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. Nuclear fusion. We were talking about that just recently. Anatronic fusion propulsion, which is using fusion without neutrons for propulsion. Creating synthetic life forms. We talk about the Greys being a synthetic life form. We're now doing this ourselves. So the point with all this technology here is, and these are some pretty good groups, NASA, DARPA, Caltech, Forbes, radioactive diamond batteries. This is pretty much saying, you know all those wild stories we heard about UFOs and extraterrestrial life and the things that they could do? Well, they were crazy in 1970, and they were still crazy in 1980, a little bit crazy in 1990, and all of a sudden, in the 21st century, not so crazy. We're doing this.
No.
So another reason to believe that they exist, because we're doing it. We're doing the same thing. You said once before, we're only looking at our own future here.
That's right? Exactly. And the scientists are embracing this belief now.
Well, yeah, and then we have, the next one is all of a sudden the government has turned around and they've started being more open about the possibility of extraterrestrial life or giving us hints. Defense Intelligence Agency, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. And we talked about some of the projects they did, such as traversing wormholes and stargates. That's extraterrestrial type of stuff. The advanced capability of advanced weapons capability of a non-terrestrial state. That's extraterrestrial. That's nobody on the Earth we're talking about here. We're talking about deep space exploration and the requirements there. We see all this in the ATIP document that we talked about. We did a show on that one.
Absolutely.
Where we're talking about advanced technology that would only have to do with an extraterrestrial event. It would not be terrestrial. It would not be China. It would not be Russia that we would be doing some of this stuff with. So that's our next argument is all of a sudden the government is being more open about this. Now it starts to get really good. Okay, you mentioned it before. All of a sudden, science is embracing the concept.
They're embracing this concept
of extraterrestrial life,
yeah.
and this has happened within the last 6 months. I have a bunch of logos here from some different groups. I have the California Institute of Technology on here. I have Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics. We have NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory. We have NASA Ames Research Center, the University of Cambridge in England, Arizona State University, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Cornell University. I think we could argue that these are pretty credible groups.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And when we look at them, we have Dr. Shmuel Bialy and Dr. Abraham Loeb from the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics. And they were the ones who were suggesting that Oumuamua, that whatever it was, thing that flew through the solar system, might have been an alien spacecraft or an alien probe of some type. We have Dr. Silvano Colombano from the NASA Ames Research Center. We talked about him. He believes that it's very possible that extraterrestrial life exists and have probably visited this planet. He believes now that he wrote a paper for SETI that says interstellar space travel is possible, and that he also believes that extraterrestrial life will not communicate using standard radio waves, that we need to change our approach.
That's right. We need to advance.
Right.
And radio waves is not the way to go.
Not the way to go. And we wrote that in the book, too. We said that the people I spoke to said they're looking in the wrong place. They're never going to get radio waves. Well, the ATIP project recently came out talking about using gravitational waves for communication. There you go.
There you go.
All right. Huh. They also talked, Silvano also talked about that extraterrestrial life might not be carbon-based. And we've always said, oh, everything in the world has to be carbon-based, has to have water. Well, all of a sudden, now the government's saying, well, that's not necessarily true. And we need to take that into more consideration. And Colombano finished his paper by saying we need to take some of these UFO reports a lot more seriously. 99.9% are nothing. But there are some out there that might be something, and we need to take them more seriously. We have a few other people on there. Dr. J. Allen Hynek, he was head of Project Blue Book. We have Dr. Carl Sagan. Everybody knows who that was. Of course, we have Stephen Hawking, who said he believed extraterrestrial exists. But at the bottom, I have NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory, because something happened in the last couple of days that just blew me away.
Let me tell you, that's very exciting, Rick.
For a lot of people, they can say this doesn't mean much, but it's huge coming from NASA. I received an announcement that NASA was conducting an educator workshop on astrobiology and the search for life. Okay? In the past, NASA really rarely talked about the search for life. They left that with SETI. What NASA would talk about was finding organic compounds and the building blocks of life. They would never be talking about the search for life. Not only are they talking about the search for life, but they're saying this has now become a key component of all their space missions. Everybody says, what's the announcement going to look like when it comes? Well, this is it. I know this is subtle, but believe me, if you work in this area, you work in the government, this is huge.
They want to teach teachers.
That's the big part. They're now going to teachers and saying, we're going to give you a workshop. So now when you teach science in school and you teach about the universe, you're going to be teaching about the existence, the probability of the existence of extraterrestrial life, and it's just a matter of us finding it. The other thing I thought was interesting about this whole thing from NASA is I get these all the time, educator workshops, and they're all about different things, and they're all interesting. And usually, you know, people will sign up for it, but you have about a week to sign up for it or two. This one was filled in less than 2 hours.
What does that tell you, Rick?
Teachers want to know about extraterrestrial life.
Absolutely.
Okay, we're getting a little closer here now. This is getting even better. NASA now has discovered within our solar system life, organic compounds. Okay, and here we have Saturn. And they found it both on the moons of Jupiter, Titan, and in the rings of Saturn, and on the moons of Saturn like Enceladus. Okay? And we're talking about carbon dioxide, ammonia. We're talking about oxygen. We're talking about nitrogen. All of a sudden, NASA is saying there is life all throughout our solar system. 10 years ago, that wouldn't have happened.
No.
Even in their announcement of the workshop, they said, recent events have dictate that we now address this type of issue of extraterrestrial life. So we have a lot of different things in here, radiation belts, but ring material consists of oxygen, chlorine, nitrogen, carbon dioxide, ammonia, which is all life.
Wow.
Okay, as well as H2O, which is water. So our number 2 reason to believe extraterrestrial life exists is because we've found it in our solar system. All right? So if it's here in our little solar system, which is nothing, where else can it be? Well, the 21st century reality is hitting us based on research done by the Hubble Space Telescope and the Kepler K2 mission. The Kepler K2 mission was, everybody's heard about exoplanets. Kepler's mission was to go out there and to find how many habitable planets there might be out there in the galaxy. And it learned a lot more than that. Based on the K2 mission, and this might be, every week it changes, this might be conservative. We know that within our own galaxy, which is 100,000 light years wide, the Milky Way galaxy, there's probably at least an average of 40 billion planets, okay, that could harbor life similar to ourselves. 40 billion planets.
Wow.
And according to Kepler, the estimate is there are 100 million galaxies out there.
And for us to think that we are alone, let me tell you, that is not reality.
One scientist, I think it was Caltech, I loved it the way he put it. He goes, that's absurd. I mean, for a scientist to say that today, that it would be absurd to think we are the only intelligent life in a universe that could contain maybe 100 or probably more, 100 million galaxies, is absurd. You put all this together, some of it, yes, in the beginning, you have to take the word of some very reputable military people and government people. You have to kind of piece together some of the archaeology. But then you start to listen to scientists who are now on board, like you said, embracing this concept.
They're embracing the thought now. The extraterrestrial life, it has to be existing. It has to be.
We look at what we find in our solar system, and we look at what's unacceptable. You put all this together. Circumstantial? Yeah, okay. But boy, it's pretty good information that now says, if you don't believe, at least believe that extraterrestrial life exists, you must be living in a cave. I'm sorry. I mean,
yeah.
The information is now here in the 21st century. We can argue whether or not it's actually visited Earth. We can do that on another show. We're going to do some shows on some of the best UFO events in the world.
You know, we've referenced a lot of different events, you know, over our time with the shows, and it's time to go back and really cover them singularly, one by one.
Yeah, and we're going to do that, I think, in the next session. That's going to be something to look at. We're going to look at, I've already listed 7 events that I think are really worthwhile. Yes. But you mentioned it all starts with Roswell.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I frequently get requests from people who say, you know, you're always referencing Roswell. We really don't know the whole story there. And that's going to be in one place, Rick, I think we're going to start.
And we've learned more over time as to you know, exactly what happened at Roswell. And in speaking to the guys that I mentioned in the beginning here, they had more information based on classified reports that they had seen over the years, some stuff that had developed. So we're going to be able to talk about a few things in Roswell. We're going to have some great props on that one, too. We're going to show you some of the stuff that we have there.
I mean, the technology that came out of that event is just mind-boggling.
You can almost cross-reference everything that Corso said, Lieutenant Colonel Philip Corso said in his book, The Day After Roswell. Everything he said as for technology, you can kind of just cross-reference that right to the ATIP secret projects.
That's
I mean,
right.
The one that I love was metallic glasses, which he basically talked about the ceramics that they were creating that were super ceramics and could do all kinds of different things. Metallic glass is exactly it. It has the properties of metal, but it's not metal. And it can do things that metal can't do. Well, he talked about that in 1997, and now we hear about it now as part of the project for the ATIP program.
Yeah, it's certainly a very interesting subject, Rick, and I can't wait to get involved with that. Getting into the nitty-gritty about Roswell and all that happened. And I'll tell you, this was a major breakthrough with
This was a huge week, and everybody will say,
them teaching teachers.
I think so.
What is going to happen with this? Believe me.
And you can say I'm kind of a nerd at this because I get so excited about this particular thing. But if you've worked in this environment, you know how the secrecy works and how the discussions work. As subtle as this may seem, for them to say this stuff, this is huge. This is like putting a big sign up saying extraterrestrials exist.
Absolutely. Well, Rick, as usual, time is flying, and tonight's show is very special, I'll tell you right now. And I can't wait to get back in here and talk a little bit more about these upcoming events and some of the things we talked about in the past. As usual, you're right on your game. And I want to remind everybody, please email us at theviewshow@AOL.com. We would just love to talk to you. And also, we would also do different events with groups of people if they want a presentation.
Some people have specific questions. They said, can you come and talk to us about that? Sure, we can. I mean, it doesn't cost anything. Sure, we can come and do that. Yeah. And I'm waiting to see what announcements we get in the next few months. So.
Well, let me tell you, today, these past few weeks have been very special. I want to thank everybody for viewing. And as usual, please enjoy yourself and good night for tonight. And we'll be back next week. Thank you.